Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on Little's Law YouTube channel. In this video, we will see about what is Perfmon or the performance monitor and how to use it, and what are the various aspects of performance monitor. So, the first point of looking into this performance monitor. So why do we need to use Perfmon or the performance monitor? So this performance monitor is used to monitor the resource usage and server processes which is included with the Windows Server, and using this Perfmon we can gather the detailed performance information, including how often the CPU is being used and how much memory is being used, and information about every other processes that is happening in the Windows machine. And before we use Perfmon, we will have to set up a data collector set, which is how Perfmon stores the data that it collects. And to collect information about any particular application, we will have to filter it out. So when we first open the performance monitor, the Perfmon, we will see this window which will come up with the performance as the main dashboard, and then we have the monitoring tools, and under monitoring tools we have the performance monitor, and then we have the data collector sets, and where we have the user defined, and where we have the system, and then the event trace sessions, the startup event trace sessions, and then the user defined reports and system reports. So this is the basic screen or the dashboard which we see when we open the performance monitor. And at the very first, the performance which we see here will give us an overview of our system's memory usage, the network usage, the disk usage, and every other aspects of the performance. And we can right click on performance and connect to another computer to view a remote computer's performance statistics in case if we want to connect it via the remote machine. And secondly, we have the monitoring tools, and from the monitoring tools icon we can right click and launch the resource monitor. And this resource monitor is another powerful tool that helps us to see how our system resources are being used. We also have the ability to launch the system reliability monitor, and this reliability monitor allows us to see the information about software updates and installations. We can also see critical events that occurred on the day when those events are occurred, and finally we can see all the problem reports that have seen from our computer by clicking view all problem reports link at the bottom of the window. And then here comes the performance monitor, which is primarily for viewing the real-time statistics, and by default only one counter is selected, that is the percentage process time counter. However, we can add additional counters by clicking on the green plus symbol. This will allow us to monitor any counters we wish in real time. Well, we can see all of the performance counters we want or we like here. The real power of performance monitor is found in its ability to capture the performance metrics over an elapsed period of time, and capturing data over a period of time allows us to see the trends, and these trends are what the most useful for determining the overall performance of our system. And to capture this data, we will have to create what we call as the data collector sets. And these data collector sets are aptly named because they collect the data and from the system, so that we can view changes in configuration information and performance information for a specified period of time. So let's go to the data collector sets. So these data collector sets are basically into three types of data collector sets. So one is the performance counter, and the second one is the event traces, and the third is the system configuration information. And the performance counter basically captures the data based on the polling of an event at a specified time interval. The event traces captures the data based on events that occur rather than based on a specified time interval, and the system configuration captures the configuration information. And under the user define, we can see the data collector sets in case if we create any of the custom data collector set on our own, and these data collection sets can contain counters, traces, and configuration collectors. And we can right click on the user defined and select new and new data collector set to create one. We can create a data collector set from a template, or we can create from our own custom set. So let's now name our data collector set, and I'm clicking on next. So in case if I want to create something from the template, I can choose it from the template, or if I want to create it from a manual one, I'm choosing the create manually advanced, and I'm selecting next. And under this we have the create data logs. So we can create a performance counter alert using the option in case if we want to create a performance counter alert, or else we can create the data logs. So for now, let's choose the create data logs, and under this we will choose all the three options: the performance counter, the event trace data, the system configuration information. And now let's click on next. And the third screen which we see here is where we'll have to add the performance counters. So let's now click on add, and now we can add the counters in here. So what are the counters which we are going to choose here is, let's go to the bottom of the screen. So under the counters we can see here the process, and the process contains multiple services and an under process v2. So now we are going to choose under the processor. So under the processor we are going to choose the percentage idle time, which tells us how and how long does the machine or the processor is idle, and then we'll choose the interrupt time. So we can click on control and we can choose whatever the counters we need, and then we will select the privilege time, and then finally the processor time, the percentage processor time. So these are the four metrics or the counters which we are going to choose for all instances. And then let's click on add at the bottom, and now we have added these counters. And then let's click on OK, and now I'm clicking on OK, and then let's choose next to go to the next one. And before that, the sample interval. So there is a quick thing. So in case if we are decreasing the sample interval to 1, we might have a lot of data which is not required. Since it gives us more data, or we might have a lot of data, but still the better one is to have, in case if the test or the monitoring is going to be a long one, it's better we can have at least a 30 seconds, which is like 2 counters or 2 values for every minute, or it is better we can have it as between 15 or 20 seconds would be a better counter interval. Then let's click on next, and in this window we will be prompted to add the trace providers, and these trace providers simply provide information to perform about a specific set of events. For example, if we want to collect event information about the Windows firewall, we would select the Microsoft Windows Firewall provider, and we can edit the properties. So let's choose the Windows Firewall provider here. Let me click on W and Microsoft Windows Firewall. So let me click on M, and it should be Microsoft Windows Firewall. So we'll have to go further down, and I have chosen Windows Firewall, and I'm clicking on OK. And then let's move on to the next steps. So I'm clicking on next, and then finally we will be asked to give a location to save the data. So we can specify any location. So for now I'm going to choose the desktop, so that once the data is collected I can delete it and I can clear it. Wow. So I am going to choose desktop, or in case if not, I'm just going to choose my folder, and then I'm clicking on OK. I can even add a folder, something like perfmon, and then I'm clicking on next. So in the final step, where we can select a user that we would like to run the data collector sets, and this may be helpful in environments where desktops and servers are locked down for security purposes. So in case if I want to change the user, I can enter the username and password and click on save and close. So I'm just clicking on save and close. So now we have created a data collector set. So here we can see the data collector set that we have created. So we can see it contains the performance counters. These are performance counters that we have created, a trace, and then the configuration. So we can right click on any of these to modify. So in case if I want to modify or if I want to add any counters, I can add it. If I want to make any changes to the log file name or to any of the required items, I can change it. Then the final part of the performance monitor is the reports section, where we can view the information that was collected by our data collector sets. And if we have ever run our data collector set, then we will not see any information when we click on it. So this is a basic overview of the Windows Performance Monitor, and once we are familiar with the parts, we can then dive into learning about which counters to use when and what counter in or the interval rate we should be trying to capture this kind of data versus the actual required data. So now coming back to the Performance Monitor dashboard, so here we can see the percentage processor time data. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to double click on the counter. So using this we can modify the changes. So on the data tab, so here we have general, we have the source, we have the data, we have the graph and the appearance. So on the data tab, I'm going to select the counter which I want to customize. So here I have only one counter which we can customize, and at the bottom we can choose the color of this particular counter, and when we click on apply, it will automatically change. And in case if I want to increase the scale, I can even do that. So this will give us a more clear picture. So let me go back to 1 and I'm clicking on apply. So in addition, we can also change the graph styles by simply clicking on the change graph type in the toolbar. So let me just go back to the toolbar. So here we can see so here we have multiple options like the line, the histogram bar, and the report. So the report gives the numbers directly, the line which gives us the line or the different format, something like a graph part. And then there are other options, like for example, we can add some counters directly to the screen. So what we did previously in the user defined the data collector set, so we can automatically add them. So for example, I'm going back to the processor. So under processor, I can add the idle time, the interrupt, the privilege, and the processor time. And when I click on OK, so now we can see so let me just add it. So I can just click on the plus symbol here, then coming back to the processor. So I'll add few counters here again. Okay, add privileged and the processor time, and I'm clicking on OK. So now we can see, so we will start to see the counters here. And after we see these counters, in case if we want to save this setting, we can just give a name for this and we can save this setting, so that every time when we want, we can automatically open this settings. And then in case if we want to give this as an image or we want to send this as a report, we can just select save images and we can click a name for this. And then in case if I want to clear everything, I can just clear, so that we can start to collect all the data from the beginning of the report. Then in case if I want to show any counters, I can just click on it, and in case if I want to hide, just hide them. And then we can even scale the selected counters. For example, this particular idle time, I just want to scale it to 10. So I can just choose 10 and then I can click apply. So this particular counter will automatically be scaled to 10. So in this way we can make changes to it. So before that, so let's see what are the performance monitor counters we have. So we have different counters. For example, the processor, the physical disk. So let me just take you through them one by one. So we have the physical disk, and this physical disk, we see the percentage disk time, which monitors the time a drive is taking to complete the read and write request, and this counter stays in high numbers for a long time. It could be an indication that the hard drive is ready for replacement. And adding other counters like the disk bytes per second, so we have the the disk bytes per second and disk read bytes per second, a disk read per second, disk writes bytes. So all these helps us to figure out the read and write speeds of the hard drive. And then so this basically, so this again, this physical disks totally or completely relates with the hard disks. And then when we come to the processor, so which is the the important counter which we have here, and then under this, so we have this percentage interrupt time, and this is the one which we monitor, or which monitors the time the CPU takes to complete the hardware request. So basically we see the interrupts when we see the performer, the task manager. So this interrupt, so this will monitor the time the CPU takes to complete the hardware request, and this count, if this counter stays above 30%, it could be an indication that there is an hardware problem. And by adding the percentage privilege time here, this counter monitors the time the processor is using to execute in kernel mode, and a high percentage of privilege time may indicate a poorly written driver or hardware malfunction. And then we have the network adapter. So let me just go to the network adapter now. So here we have the network adapter, and this includes a number of counters to monitor the sent and received bytes for one or multiple network adapters. And by selecting the counters such as the bytes received per second or the bytes sent per second, this will show us how much bandwidth is being utilized by our wireless or the Ethernet adapter. And if we are always downloading files or streaming high resolution videos and bandwidth, it consistently hits more than 85%, and we might want to consider upgrading our data speed plan. So this in fact will help us to understand the internet latency speed as again. However, if we are not using our internet connection heavily, but we still see any high network activity, so it could be a sign of something not working correctly, or it could also be a malware hidden on our computer. So this even helps us to identify the security part of testing. And then when it comes to the memory, so the next part is the most important one, which is the memory. So next to CPU, it's the memory. So next to processor, it's the memory that we will have to take a look at. So let me just go to memory, and under memory we have the percentage committed bytes in use, which will monitor the total memory currently in use by our system. And if the number is continuously greater than 80%, then we don't have enough memory on our system. And adding the available megabytes here, which is the fourth one, will measure the amount of physical memory available for running processes. And if this value is less than 5% of the total RAM installed on our computer, then we may need to add more memory. Then we have the page files, which includes counters to monitor how page files are being utilized, and if our computer is slow and the page file counters are consistently high, it can be an indication that we need to upgrade our computer's memory. So in case if we want to collect this data, we'll have to select the performance counter, and then we'll have to select start, and automatically if we go to this location, we can see the data. So let's go to the location, and now here we can see, so we have started to collect, and here we can see the counters have got appeared in the screen, and they start to collect the data. And in case if we want to stop it, we can in case if we want to pause, we can automatically pause, or we can stop the recording of the performance metrics. So for now, let me just close it. I've stopped here already, and in case if you have any doubts, you can just go back to the performance monitor screen, and then let me just go back. So still it's running here, and here we can see the play button, so still it's running here. So I'm just clicking on stop the data collector set. So after stopping this, and if we go here to the data, and then I'm opening the screen, so here we can see these are the data that we have collected during the monitoring. And in case if I want to save this images, I can just save this as an image, and I can use it in the report. So this way we can collect, we can monitor, then we can collect the report. So in case if I want to monitor this during the entire test window. I can just run them during the entire test, and then I can save it, and I can use it as, or I can even use it to find what are the bottlenecks, like we discussed earlier, like the memory or performance or the processor. So anything we can identify. So this is how we can identify. So what is the exact bottleneck during the load test in the application or in the server. And even we can customize this data collector set. So the data collection, like going to the data collector set and right clicking on it will take us to the properties, and under properties we have the stop conditions where we can give the entire durations. For example, like if it has to be 60 minutes, we can just choose 60 minutes, or like 1 hour or 2 hour, we can give the duration, and then we can, once we click on apply, automatically it will start to record. And even we can give the maximum size of data so that we don't run out of the memory in the machine that we are monitoring the test. So in all these ways, so we even can just choose this so that it will restart the data collector set after the limits, and we can give the duration, and we can set the maximum size, and even we can stop when all data collectors have finished. So there are like multiple options, and in case if you want to schedule the test when you were not working, so we can just add the time so that we can identify, we can monitor like which time of the day when we were not monitoring it. We can even get it from the logs, and we can even set the security. And so these schedule stop conditions are the most critical one. We can use it in case if we want to run the test at different time of the day. So with that, I think we come to an end, and I believe this video would have been very, very, very useful to you. So until we meet you in another interesting video, it's Baba from Vasan Shanmugam and Little's Law.